Good afternoon, and welcome to the Editor's Podcast for the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. I am Dr. Linda Smetzler, Editor-in-Chief of the journal. With me today, I have Dr. Judy Beto and Dr. Liz Metalinos-Katsaris. Judy is an emeritus professor at Dominican University in River Forest, Illinois, and Liz is an emeritus professor at Simmons University in Boston. Both have dedicated their professional careers to dietetics and teaching, and they have actually written 2 monographs on the topic of survey methodology in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and they will be talking to me about those 2 articles today. These articles are monographs. The first is titled Electronic Survey Methodology for Data Collection and Analysis in Nutrition and Dietetics Research. And the first author on that one is Judy. And the second monograph, Survey Methodology for Data Collection and Analysis in Nutrition and Dietetics Research, where the first author is Liz. Both monographs will appear in the May issue. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for being with me today.
Thank you.
We sure appreciate it.
So my first question, and Liz and Judy will both be responding to this question. Survey research, I think, today has become an incredibly popular method for collecting data. And I wondered if you would describe the general protocol for this type of research.
So this is Judy, and she's going to just start out a little bit in that when you talk about survey, particularly when we talk about students and survey research, it really is grounded in the fact that everybody has an opinion about something. And you're surveying people in a very informal way every day when you figure out what college to go to, what career to follow, what information to believe. And I think what's wonderful about survey research is it gives you an opportunity to not only learn about other people's opinions, but learn how to measure it and measure it in a way that you can use it to enhance further research to help people learn things in a better or different way, or learn things about a population that you didn't know as much about or perhaps was not as clear. So I think this survey research offers everybody a style, a way to actually take a research question that's of passion and interest to them, and actually using the guidelines that we provided, actually create a system that's valid and reliable to actually gather information. And I know that Liz will back me up on this and add even more information.
Yes, this is Liz. Yes, Judy, I totally back you up on this. You know, people underestimate the complexity and value of survey research, just like the public underestimates the nutrition profession. People think that just because they can cook and they can eat and they can, deal with food, they think nutrition is easier than it is. Similarly, even our colleagues fall into this trap with survey development implementation. In other words, they think, I'm a good writer, I'm clear in my writing, so I can develop my own survey. It should be easy, but not so at all. It's complex and takes expertise and time to do it correctly. In terms of a protocol for survey development, there are many details of the process in the papers. In my paper, in which I'm first author, it's figure 2, has guidelines in survey development. And the guidelines are, in general, preparation, share with the experts, pre-test, and revise. But there are many steps under those. But the first step is really key. It's the preparation. Your research question, the conceptual framework, the target population, and developing question objectives, like what do you want to know from each of these questions? That's the foundation, just like if the house plans in architectural plans are not clear, you won't end up with the same house. Same with survey research. If you're not clear in what you want to get out of it, then you won't get what you need out of it, and the data will not be accurate.
Okay, thank you both. My next question, what are some of the pitfalls that researchers face when they're doing survey research? And Liz, you'll be responding to this question.
So unfortunately, there are many pitfalls that one can fall into, and which is why we laid out some do's and don'ts in figure 3 and figure 4 in the paper. But I've seen some common and serious pitfalls over the course of my 30 years of involvement in survey development and implementation. So I'll just go over a few of those. One is if your original research question is not specific and clear. So then that's what's guiding the whole process. Or the question you want to answer if you're a dietitian wanting to do something like customer satisfaction, if that's not clear. Also, if question objectives are not clear or they're not done, I've seen that many times, people neglect to do that, then nobody knows, you don't know what it is you really want to get out of that question, and you end up with inaccurate data. Trying to accomplish way too much in a survey because you have a captive audience, perhaps. Question wording or response options are confusing maybe or unclear. Another common pitfall is not using existing questions for some of the demographics that may have been asked on many national and state surveys, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Another one is interpreting validation as equal, regardless of the type of validation. We talk about that in the paper. And not testing your survey thoroughly, so that even if it's a validated survey, it should be tested on the population that you're working on, particularly if it's not the same as the population on which the validation study was done on. So these are all common pitfalls that people fall into, which can yield data that does not reflect the truth, which is what we're trying to reflect.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, logically to follow, is how can difficulties be resolved to strengthen the significance of the outcomes of the research question? And Judy will be the respondent on this one.
I think it's so interesting that when we do a survey, of course, the people aren't in the room. We're finding people that are basically unknown to us. But it's important for us to learn about our potential audience, because one of the reasons that you have strengthened the significance is if you can actually find the audience that you're interested in surveying. And many of us get many surveys and emails, but it's the ones that really either the subject line or the incentive or a personal bias or experience we have makes the data that we're going to provide even more richer and more dimensional to what the subject question is. So it's important, I think, that we think who we're looking to find, so that when we design our questionnaire for our target audience, that we in fact are using a subject line or an invitation or a way to recruit them that helps us recruit a group that's interested but not necessarily biased, because we're trying to look for a wide variety of people who want to know, for instance, if the color of beets accepts them or not, if they want a yellow beet or a red beet, and if it's a problem. It can be as simple as that, but if you have a bias involved, they'll be important. The second thing, I think one of the things we've talked about in both of our papers is the necessity of pre-testing. And many people open up their survey on their smartphone, which may look very different than a laptop, which make very different than different screens. And if I have to turn my phone and if I have to enlarge it and I don't see the full question. So part of these things we can do to resolve these, what seem to be logistical difficulties, to strengthen the significance of the outcomes we have, because the people that do respond are going to be able to use the survey in the manner that we hope that they'll be able to answer it in a clear and effective way.
What are 3 takeaway messages for those who are reading your articles?
The first takeaway message is that results of surveys can make a really important contribution to the public's health and the nutrition profession overall. but that does depend on how the survey is done. And it needs to be done according to the guidelines that are going to yield accurate data and useful data and answer the question that that the researcher intended to answer or the practitioner intended to answer. And secondly, survey development and implementation isn't easy, but the good news is that there are many excellent sources in addition to our papers. There are others as well, but one can start with reading our papers and then move from there. So there are resources to do this correctly. And then the third is it's important to take the time in the beginning to really prepare, to carefully plan what your overarching question is, what the steps will be, your conceptual framework, and what you want to get out of each question. And this is very time consuming, yes, but in the end, it will be well worth it because you will then get the data that you sought to get in your survey.
And this is Judy. And my top 3 items I have really focus more on my statistical background. First of all, we provide a checklist, and the checklist is important when you're reporting. No one can really believe what you've done unless you use this checklist to make sure that you've actually told the reader how many people you had, how you recruited them, how many people were cleaned from the data, so that people understand the process. Even if you have to use an actual infographic or a figure to understand, the checklist helps to make sure that before you put your survey actually up for publication or as you're writing up your results, it gives you a really good guideline that Liz and I developed to help when you're planning and reporting. So when you get those reviewers back, many of their questions have already been answered because you've used the checklist to make sure that you've told them what they think they need to know to believe your data. The second one is sampling. And in my particular paper, we also talked about total survey error. And what it means is you don't have any idea of how many people have purple hair with green eyes or whatever you're trying to measure. But it's important that you representatively sample, for instance, dietitians. Do you just want dietitians below the age of 30 or dietitians above? You have very clear ideas so that you, when you do get it, you can then possibly compare it to a sample, a reference sample. So if you have 2 male dietitians, you know how many theoretically male dietitians are registered, and that might help you understand a little bit if you've sampled correctly or among where they live or whatever it would be. So how you sample your population is more importantly than how many number of people you get. And finally, I think it's spending time to process before you actually look at how you collect your data. And we have a figure 2 in ours that also talks about how do you look at the software? How do you evaluate the cost? All these questions before you get going. How does the survey go electronically? Can people go back and look at a question? Can they only go forward? Can they skip a question? And I think these help you in reducing the amount of survey data loss you'll have over time.
And Liz, how can an instructor and practicing RDN use your articles in their work?
Instructors can use the articles to help our students develop first an appreciation of the value and complexity of surveys and all the steps involved. You could start with undergrads, even maybe seniors, and then move on to graduate students, where with undergrads we would lay the foundation for an understanding of the basics and maybe give them a small assignment that they would have to develop a short survey. And then with graduate students, they can apply the basics to a question that's a little more involved, and they can see how it works in practice. And then we as instructors can understand when they apply it, what is it they understand and what they don't understand, and so will they. Then in terms of those in graduate studies, now that everyone will need an MS in order to gain the credential, the dietetics credential, they can do small research projects in which they learn so much. And they not only learn how to do it, but what can go wrong. And that's a very important learning experience. And then there are instructors who are very well versed in survey development, and they can use these articles to help educate their colleagues, their junior colleagues, because junior colleagues will be doing research often using surveys, and that would be very helpful to them. And in terms of the practicing dietitians, the majority of RDNs practicing in the field are not doing what they might consider research. So how can they use this? Well, we need to evaluate our effectiveness as dietitians. So, and we need to evaluate, patient and client satisfaction. So these papers can be very useful as a foundation for that. It's because you need to know, dietitians need to know, which surveys out there are good surveys that I can use to evaluate satisfaction. They need to know if I find this survey and establish that it is a valid survey, but I want to use it in a different population. Let's say the survey was validated on a younger population. You work with the elderly. What do I need to do? And then the third aspect they need to know about is how to administer the survey. And one can argue that you can always hire a company to survey your clients, but that's very expensive. And I don't think most dietitians practicing currently, let's say they're in private practice, want to spend thousands in doing that. Instead, they could get good results by understanding the process and using it.
And now, Judy, finally, what is the future of survey research and how might it change the way we look at dietetics and nutrition related to outcomes?
So I think what's so exciting is we are really on the verge of virtual access. Almost everybody in the United States is slowly getting online. And there are some countries, for instance, that in Denmark, that requires everybody to have access in order for them to participate in even voting or any kind of government reimbursement. So we're getting closer to that, which means our ability to actually access everybody, whether you're a dietitian or a client, is becoming more and more connected. And that connection can obviously be used in a very powerful way to let people know what dietitians can do for them. And more importantly than that, show results of working with a dietitian other than just a TV program that says, I did this or they did that. They can actually figure out ways that you can individualize and personalize things and know what really works in our really large, varied population in the world. And secondly, I also think technology can also be challenging to us with AI, with the chatbots and things, that when you do a survey online and you offer an incentive, sometimes all these bots come out of nowhere, which is why you have the CAPTCHA and other things to help do that, because you do have to clean your data to make sure that who's answering it is in fact, and that requires a little bit more work. But the future of survey research, to me, both good and bad in technology, is where it's lying, so that we can actually go forward and touch everybody's world, and everybody would know what a dietitian is, no matter where you live in the world or where your client is.
Okay, many thanks to both of you. I want to say that I think these two monographs, just has been discussed, are incredibly important to instructors and can really help with this particular type of research, because we need to know more about how to do survey research. And I think, just as been said, this is going to be an ever increasing type of study design being used by dietitians and students who are focusing on nutrition and dietetics. So thank you so much for something that's incredibly timely, and also novel in terms of the work that we're doing relative to research. And thank you so much for responding to my questions. And I appreciate your time and participating in this podcast. Thank you
Thank you
again.
so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.